Late at night, in a skyscraper, their secret began with a single kiss. A billionaire and a janitor, caught in a love that could ruin them both. The city below glittered like a field of broken glass, but Adrian Cole's attention wasn't on the skyline. It was on her. Mara's back pressed against the glass wall of his office, her breath quick and uneven as his hand traced the line of her jaw. Midnight cloaked the room, save for the faint glow of the city and the low hum of the cleaning cart abandoned somewhere down the hall. The billionaire CEO and the janitor, locked together in a moment that should never have existed. Adrian lowered his mouth to hers again, and she responded with a hunger that startled him every time. She kissed like someone who had nothing to lose, someone who wasn't afraid of the risk. He, on the other hand, had everything to lose: an empire, a reputation, control. Yet here he was, undoing himself piece by piece. Her fingers tangled in his tie, yanking him closer. "Someone could walk in," she whispered against his lips. "No one's here," Adrian murmured, though the danger only sharpened the edge of his desire. Every second with her felt like walking a wire strung between skyscrapers, terrifying, exhilarating, impossible to stop. Mara laughed softly, a sound that always caught him off guard. It wasn't the shy laugh of a woman dazzled by wealth or power. It was mischievous, private, like she knew something he didn't. That laugh, more than her touch, had him hooked. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. His control returned in fragments, as though reassembling a mask he wore by daylight. "This is madness," he said. "Yes," she agreed, her accent lilting around the word. "But you started it." He should have denied it. He should have reminded her of the danger, of the impossibility of what they were doing. Instead, he felt a dangerous urge to confess, to tell her what he had never told anyone, that for all his billions, all his skyscrapers, he had never felt alive until her. But Mara, as always, gave him no room to spiral into vulnerability. She slipped from his grasp with a quick smile, tugging her uniform shirt back into place. "I still have 2 more floors to finish before sunrise. If I don't, they notice." "Let them notice," Adrian said. She shook her head, already pushing her cart away. "That's not how the world works for people like me." And just like that, she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Adrian sank into his chair, staring at the smudged reflection of himself in the glass. CEO, tycoon, master of everything in his world, except her. 3 months earlier, he wouldn't have believed any of this possible. He had been untouchable then, a machine in tailored suits, ruling from the top floor of Cole Tower with an iron grip. Mara had been invisible, a woman with a mop and a cart, moving through his empire like a ghost no one bothered to see. But one night, long after the staff had gone home and the city's noise softened into a low hum, he opened his office door and found her there. That was where it began. And even now, as the ghost of her laugh lingered in the air, Adrian knew he should have walked away that night. Instead, he stepped forward.
The night Adrian Cole first saw Mara properly, he almost dismissed her as a mirage. He had been pacing his office, sharp suit jacket discarded, the glow of the city washing silver across his desk. His head ached from numbers and signatures, from the pressure of a billion-dollar merger that would define the next decade of his empire. He hadn't noticed the soft squeak of wheels in the hall until a shadow passed his glass wall. At first, it was just another cleaner, one of dozens who rotated through the tower. But then she stepped into the light. Mara. Her uniform was plain, navy shirt, black trousers, but it couldn't hide the kind of beauty that startled men into silence. Her skin carried a warm glow, her hair a cascade of dark silk that kept slipping from the bun she'd forced it into. Even the way she moved, steady, efficient, with a calm self-possession, made her stand out. She bent over the mop bucket, and Adrian caught the faint curve of her cheek, the way her lashes brushed against her skin as she focused on her work. There was something almost cinematic about her, as though the fluorescent hallway had transformed into a stage, and she the lead no one expected. Adrian wasn't the first to notice. He would later learn that every man in the building had tried at some point. The junior analysts, the night security guards, even a few of his executives. Whispers had reached her ears, invitations for coffee, compliments disguised as casual remarks, awkward jokes meant to break her composure. But Mara had a reputation. She turned them all down. Not rudely, not cruelly. She had a way of shutting down in advance with a polite smile and a gentle word, leaving the hopeful men embarrassed, yet oddly respectful. She radiated an unspoken rule. Her job came first. She wasn't there to flirt, to climb, to entertain fantasies. She was there to clean. Adrian found himself both intrigued and unsettled by that. In his world, beauty was currency, used and traded as ruthlessly as stocks. Yet here was a woman, breathtaking enough to command any room she walked into, and she wielded her beauty as though it were invisible. That night, their eyes met for the first time. She'd noticed him staring from the office doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the skyline. For the briefest moment, something flickered in her expression. Not recognition, not deference, but something sharper, almost wary. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice low, accented but steady. It caught him off guard. Few addressed him so directly without stumbling. "You know who I am." Her lips curved, not quite into a smile. "Everyone here knows who you are." "And you are," he asked, though he already felt foolish for the question. "Mara." She returned to her mop, as though the conversation had already ended. Adrian lingered. "How long have you worked here?" "Long enough." The answer was clipped, not disrespectful, but final. She wrung out the mop and pushed it across the marble floor with precise strokes. Something about her refusal to be dazzled pricked at him. Most people, employees, partners, rivals, wanted something from Adrian Cole. They softened their voices, lengthened their smiles, bent themselves into shapes that might please him. Mara didn't. She gave him nothing except the sight of her turning back to her work, as though his presence were irrelevant. It was infuriating and fascinating. For days after, Adrian found himself noticing her, noticing and pretending not to. She appeared in the peripheries of his nights, cleaning the empty boardroom, polishing the chrome elevator doors, wiping away fingerprints left by men who thought themselves important. She moved like someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere, a quiet queen ruling an invisible kingdom. And yet, despite the swarm of men orbiting her, Mara remained solitary, unreachable. Adrian told himself he admired her discipline, that was all. But late one night, as he watched her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear and murmur something to herself while scrubbing the marble, he realized the truth. He wanted her. Not in the casual, fleeting way he had wanted women before, but with an intensity that felt like a threat to his own balance. Mara, the janitor with eyes like winter skies, had unsettled the billionaire who owned half the skyline. And deep down, Adrian suspected she knew it.
Mara had been a mystery long before she ever set foot inside Cole Tower. She'd grown up oceans away, in a village where the streets turned to mud after rain and the stars burned brighter than the city's tallest towers. Her beauty had been a curse there as much as a blessing. By 16, she couldn't walk to the market without men stopping to stare. By 18, offers of marriage, some sincere, others purely transactional, had swarmed her like flies. But Mara's mother had taught her something that clung tighter than tradition. Your face is not your fate. So while other girls her age leaned into compliments, Mara learned to turn them aside. She worked, she studied, and when the chance came to leave, she took it without hesitation. New York had promised freedom, anonymity, a chance to build a life not dictated by men's gazes. Of course, the reality was less romantic. Immigrant work was brutal, and credentials from home meant little in a country that demanded papers and proof. She'd taken jobs in diners, laundromats, anywhere that would pay in cash until her situation stabilized. When a cleaning company offered steady hours and enough pay to cover rent, she accepted. She told herself it was temporary, a stepping stone. But the janitor's job gave her something unexpected: silence. When she pushed her mop across marble floors at night, the noise of the world dimmed. No catcalls, no expectations, no judging eyes. Just her and the quiet rhythm of work, the faint scent of disinfectant, the whisper of her own thoughts. It was, strangely, peace. And Mara guarded that peace fiercely. Her co-workers teased her sometimes, called her the Ice Queen, because she turned down invitations and brushed off flirting with that polite, unshakable smile. But Mara didn't mind. She'd seen enough to know that indulging men's desires always came with a cost, a piece of herself chipped away. She preferred to remain whole. Which is why Adrian Cole's interest unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She had recognized him instantly the first night their eyes met. His face was on the building itself. Magazine clippings framed in the lobby, a symbol of ruthless ambition. Men like him didn't notice women like her. They floated above, untouchable, sipping champagne at rooftop galas, while the rest of the world scrubbed their footprints from the floor. But he had noticed her, and not in the crude, careless way other men had. He studied her as if trying to solve a puzzle, as though she were more than her uniform, more than her beauty. That made him dangerous. So Mara doubled down on her focus. She moved quickly through the floors, gave him curt but respectful answers, and never lingered when she felt his gaze on her. She told herself he would lose interest, as they all did, once he realized she would not play the part he expected. But late at night, alone in her small apartment, she found her thoughts wandering back to him despite herself, to the sharpness of his eyes, the weariness etched into his expression when he thought no one was looking, the quiet way he leaned in the doorway as if testing the edges of solitude. Adrian Cole, billionaire, master of the skyline, looked lonely. And loneliness was something Mara understood all too well. Still, she reminded herself of the promise she had made years ago. She would never trade her peace for a man's attention, no matter how powerful, no matter how tempting. The promise held until one night the storm broke. A blackout swept across Manhattan, plunging even Cole Tower into darkness. Elevators stalled, emergency lights flickered, and for the first time, the glass and steel palace felt fragile, human. That was the night Adrian and Mara were trapped on the 37th floor together, with nothing but silence, shadows, and each other. And Mara realized her rules might not be enough.
By day, Mara was a ghost. She blended into the background, a navy uniform and a mop, unnoticed, except for the whispers she brushed off with a smile. But away from Cole Tower, her life was far richer than anyone suspected. Her apartment was small, a single-bedroom walk-up in Queens, with walls thin enough to hear her neighbors argue in Spanish, sing in Creole, laugh in languages she didn't know. But it was hers, paid for with her own money, no one else's. On one wall hung a single framed photograph, her mother, standing outside their old home with sunlight in her hair. It was the only picture Mara had carried across the ocean, and the sight of it grounded her on the loneliest nights. Every morning, after coming home from her shift, she traded her uniform for notebooks and textbooks. Where others might collapse into bed, Mara opened her laptop and slipped into a different world. Lectures, assignments, and exams from the university where she was pursuing a degree in human resource management. It hadn't been easy to get in. The paperwork had been a battle, the tuition fees another. But Mara had calculated down to the last cent. If she worked the janitor job 6 nights a week, lived frugally, and took classes part-time, she could pay her way. No loans, no debts, no dependence on anyone. She wanted more than just survival. She wanted a future she could build with her own hands. Her classmates, most of them younger and wealthier, never suspected the double life she lived. On video calls, they saw only her sharp mind and her ability to cut through complex problems with clarity. They respected her, even envied her composure, never knowing she often joined lectures after scrubbing the marble floors of Cole Tower until her arms ached. At night, when her shift ended, she sometimes passed the university's glass building downtown. She would pause, staring at the bright halls through the windows, watching students hurrying between classes. She knew her time would come. One day she wouldn't just walk past those halls, she would walk through them, degree in hand, not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. This dream fueled her, kept her immune to the advances of men who wanted only her beauty. They didn't see her ambition, her hunger for knowledge, her determination to carve a path different from the one her village had written for her. They saw only a face, a body, and assumed that was enough to tempt her. It wasn't. On rare weekends, when she allowed herself a sliver of indulgence, Mara visited a small cafe near the East River. She always ordered the same thing: black coffee and a slice of almond cake. She'd sit by the window, studying her textbooks, while families strolled past and couples laughed by the water. It was her sanctuary, her reminder that she was building towards something greater, even if no one else could see it yet. Yet for all her careful walls, Adrian Cole's presence had started to disturb her balance. The first time she caught herself thinking about him outside work, she'd been annoyed with herself. It happened on a morning train when she should have been reviewing notes for her human resource course on organizational psychology. Instead, her mind kept replaying the way his voice had sounded, calm, deliberate, but edged with something almost vulnerable when he had asked her name. It was ridiculous. Men like him weren't part of her world. Billionaire CEOs didn't notice janitors except as shadows moving through their halls. She told herself it was nothing, that he'd lose interest soon. Still, when she closed her laptop at night and stared at the photo of her mother, Mara wondered what her mother would say if she knew. Would she warn her to stay away from danger? Or would she smile knowingly, the way mothers did, and remind Mara that even strong women sometimes longed for more than solitude? She shook the thought away. She had no time for fantasies. Her job paid her bills. Her studies promised her future. And her heart belonged to no one. At least, that's what she believed.
Thunder rumbled low over Manhattan, a growl that rolled between the skyscrapers.
Mara had just started mopping the 37th floor when the first flash of lightning cut the sky in two. She barely noticed. It wasn't her business to notice the weather, but when the lights flickered overhead, she paused. And then everything went dark. The hum of machines, the constant buzz of the fluorescent bulbs, even the air conditioning snuffed out in an instant. Emergency lights clicked on a moment later, their dim red glow casting the marble halls in eerie shadows. Mara sighed. A blackout. She'd lived through worse. She pushed her mop bucket against the wall and prepared to wait it out. But when she turned, she realized she wasn't alone. Adrian Cole stood at the far end of the corridor, his tall frame caught in the dim red light. For once, he didn't look like the polished figure from magazine covers. His jacket was off, his tie loosened, and his expression unreadable as he glanced around the powerless floor. "Backup generators will kick in soon," Mara said, surprising herself with the need to break the silence. Her voice echoed against the glass. He looked at her, and even in the dim glow, his gaze was sharp. "You don't seem nervous." "Why should I be?" she replied, crossing her arms. "It's just a blackout. Lights go out, then they come back." Adrian gave a faint, humorless laugh, spoken like someone who's never seen what happens when people panic. Mara tilted her head. "And you? You look more unnerved than me." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer, his polished shoes silent on the marble. The red light deepened the planes of his face, making him seem both older and strangely vulnerable. "This building runs on control," he said finally. "Every detail, every light, every camera, every locked door. When it all goes out, you realize how fragile the system really is." Mara studied him for a long moment. She'd always thought of Adrian Cole as untouchable, armored in wealth and power. But here in the half-dark, he looked like a man carrying more weight than he could admit. A gust of wind rattled the glass, and the city outside went black too. Block after block disappeared into darkness, leaving only the faint glimmer of car headlights far below. "Looks like it's not just the building," Mara murmured. Adrian stepped closer until they stood only a few feet apart. The silence pressed between them, heavy and strange. For a moment, Mara was acutely aware of her own breathing, the faint scent of disinfectant from the mop bucket, the distant creak of the storm against the tower. Then the elevator dinged, sharp in the stillness. Both turned, the doors slid open, and revealed nothing but pitch darkness inside. The car had stalled, caught mid-floor. Adrian exhaled sharply through his nose. "So much for the generators." "Guess we're stuck here," Mara said lightly, though her chest felt tighter than usual. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. He moved closer, leaning against the glass wall beside her. "You don't scare easily, do you?" "I shouldn't," she shrugged. "Fear doesn't fix anything." He studied her, as though trying to peel away her layers. "Most people in this building are desperate to be seen, to climb, to impress. You don't seem to care at all." "Because I don't?" she said simply. Adrian's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "That makes you dangerous." Mara frowned. "Dangerous? I clean floors." "No." His gaze locked onto hers, unflinching. "You remind me that not everything can be bought. That unsettles me." Her breath caught before she could stop it. There was something raw in his voice, something she hadn't expected to hear from a man like him. For a heartbeat, the storm outside didn't matter, the blackout didn't matter. There was only the quiet pull between them, the strange sense that the universe had stripped everything away so they could finally stand in the same shadow. And then, almost on cue, The lights flickered back on. The hum of machines returned, the city beyond glowing back to life as if nothing had happened. Mara exhaled, releasing a tension she didn't realize she had been holding. She reached for her mop, ready to retreat behind the safety of routine. But Adrian caught her wrist. Not hard, not possessive, just enough to stop her. "Mara." His voice was low, uncertain, almost pleading. She looked up at him, her gray eyes steady, unreadable. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole felt as though the ground beneath him wasn't marble, but quicksand.
In the following nights, Adrian found himself leaving his office door ajar, listening for the faint squeak of Mara's mop bucket. He told himself it was coincidence when he happened to step out just as she passed. She, for her part, met his presence with polite detachment, but her eyes lingered a fraction longer each time. It was during one of those nights, after midnight, that the first true crack appeared. Mara had been polishing the chrome elevator doors, her reflection of blurred twinned in the surface. Adrian stepped into the corridor, his sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned on his desk. "You work like the building depends on it," he said. She glanced at him, unimpressed. "It does. You wouldn't like it much if your boardroom smelled like dust." He smirked faintly, leaning against the wall. "You think I notice dust?" "I think you notice everything," she replied, wiping the last streak away. The truth of her words unsettled him, though he didn't show it. Instead, he found himself asking, "Do you ever get tired of this? Cleaning floors that people dirty again the next day?" Mara set the rag aside, her expression calm. "Work is work. It pays for what matters." Adrian tilted his head. "And what matters to you?" For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer, but then she surprised him. "School. I'm studying human resource management. Nights pay the bills, days I study." He blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "You're in school?" "Yes." She folded her arms, as if daring him to belittle it. "I'm not cleaning forever." Adrian's chest tightened with something he hadn't expected, relief. She wasn't an illusion of beauty masking emptiness. She had a mind, a plan, a future she was building with her own hands. "What year?" he asked. "Second, part-time." She lifted her chin. "I'll finish, even if it takes longer than others." Adrian found himself smiling, a real smile, uncalculated. "Good. That's good." Mara arched a brow. "Surprised?" "Not surprised. Impressed." The word hung in the air, heavier than intended. Mara shifted, uncertain, then gave a short laugh. "Most people don't find mops impressive." "I'm not most people." Silence stretched between them. Not the awkward kind, but charged, alive. For the first time, Adrian saw beyond her beauty, beyond the careful walls she had built. He saw her hunger for more, her discipline, her quiet refusal to let the world define her. And for the first time, Mara saw Adrian not as the billionaire from magazine covers, but as a man leaning against a wall at midnight, eyes softened by something dangerously close to admiration. "You shouldn't be here," she said finally, as though reminding them both of the invisible line they were crossing. "Neither should you," he countered. Their eyes met, and the line blurred completely. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her space to stop him. She didn't move. The storm outside was gone, but inside, something pulsed like electricity. His hand lifted almost without permission, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. Mara's breath hitched. And then, as though pulled by forces larger than themselves, she tilted her face upward. Their lips met not in the fire of desperation, but in a quiet, searching kiss that felt both impossible and inevitable. When they broke apart, Mara's eyes flickered with something unreadable: fear, longing, defiance all at once. She stepped back,
her voice unsteady but firm. "This can't happen." Adrian swallowed, his pulse racing. It already did. She grabbed her rag, retreating toward her cart. Forget it. But he couldn't. As she wheeled the cart away, Adrian stood frozen, the taste of her still on his lips, the echo of her ambition ringing in his mind. He had admired women before, desired them, possessed them, but never had he been impressed. And that terrified him more than the blackout ever had.
After that first kiss, Adrian and Mara pretended nothing had changed. At least they tried. She continued mopping floors, pushing her cart through the halls with the same quiet efficiency. He continued running an empire, making decisions that shifted markets and shook competitors. But when their paths crossed, the air thickened. A brush of hands as he passed her in the hall. A glance too long when she thought no one was watching. Small, stolen conversations in corners where security cameras didn't reach. The secrecy made it intoxicating and dangerous. It didn't take long for others to notice. One Tuesday morning, after a particularly long night of reviewing contracts, Adrian walked into the boardroom and found two of his senior executives murmuring by the window. They fell silent when they saw him, their smiles too quick, their greetings too polished. Later that day, his assistant, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, raised an eyebrow as she handed him his schedule. "You've been staying later than usual, Mr. Cole. Should I start ordering dinner for two?" Adrian froze for the briefest second before covering it with a dismissive chuckle. "I don't eat with the furniture staff, if that's what you're implying." The assistant smirked knowingly. "Of course not, sir." He said nothing more, but a sliver of unease lodged itself in his chest. His world thrived on perception, and perception was shifting. Meanwhile, Mara noticed it too. One of the security guards, a broad-shouldered man named Rick, had been lingering near her station more than usual. "You got the boss's attention," he said one night, leaning casually against the wall as she refilled her mop bucket. His grin was sly. "Man like him, woman like you, can't say I'm surprised." Mara kept her gaze on the water, her voice cool. "You shouldn't say things like that." Rick laughed. "Relax, it's just talk. But you might want to be careful. People notice more than you think." That night, she scrubbed harder than usual, her hands raw from the chemicals, her mind racing. She had fought for anonymity, for peace, and now it was unraveling because she had let herself step closer to the man who ruled the tower. Still, when she saw Adrian standing by the window of his office, watching the rain fall in sheets over the city, she couldn't stop herself. She entered without knocking. "You have to be careful," she said quietly. "Careful?" He turned, surprised. "People are talking." Her arms were crossed, her tone sharper than usual. "Your staff, security, they notice things. If they figure out—" "They won't," Adrian interrupted, his voice steady. "They will," she insisted. "Men like you can't hide anything. The world watches every step you take. And me—" She exhaled, shaking her head. "I can't afford to be dragged into it." Her words hit him harder than any boardroom insult ever had. She was right. For him, it was reputation. For her, it was survival. He reached out, gently touching her arm. "Mara, I—" "Don't," she whispered, pulling back. "Don't make promises you can't keep." But her eyes betrayed her. Beneath the steel, he saw the same fire that had drawn him from the start. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they couldn't say. And then, as if compelled, Adrian closed the gap and kissed her again, harder, hungrier than before. This time, she didn't pull away. When they finally parted, Mara's breath came quick, her hand resting against his chest as if to steady herself. "You're going to ruin me," she said,
half in fear, half in wonder. Adrian's reply was quiet, dangerous. Maybe you'll ruin me first. Neither of them knew which possibility scared them more.
The breaking point came on an ordinary night. Mara was bent over her mop, scrubbing the 37th floor as she had done countless times before. The building was quiet, but she could feel Adrian's eyes on her from his office doorway. He had been watching her for weeks, his restraint fraying with each passing night. Finally, he crossed the corridor, his footsteps decisive. "Enough," he said. She glanced up, startled. "Enough what?" "This." His voice was sharper than usual, but not with anger, with conviction. "You mopping floors, pretending you're invisible. You are not invisible, Mara. You're mine." Her grip on the mop tightened. "Adrian, I told you, this job pays for my school. It keeps me independent." He stepped closer, gently but firmly taking the mop from her hands and leaning it against the wall. "You're not a janitor to me. You never were. You're my queen, and you can't keep cleaning floors as though that's all you deserve." Her breath caught. She had never seen him like this, his eyes burning, his voice trembling with something close to desperation. "You think I want to rescue you? No. I want to honor you. I've built skyscrapers, Mara, but you built yourself. I've never respected anyone more in my life, and if it means paying for your education, funding every dream you have, giving you the life you deserve, then that's what I'll do. Because I can't stand here and watch you scrub marble when you should be shaping futures." For a long moment, she said nothing. The storm of emotions in her chest, fear, pride, longing, made it hard to breathe. She had sworn never to depend on a man, never to let herself be defined by someone else's power. But Adrian wasn't offering chains. He was offering freedom, love, and a future she had dared to only imagine alone. Finally, she whispered, "And if I say yes?" He cupped her face, his eyes unwavering. "Then we plan our future together. You finish your studies without worry. You live without fear. And we show this world that the janitor and the billionaire were never mismatched. They were meant." Mara's defenses, years in the making, cracked wide open. Tears stung her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Then yes." The announcement shook the city. When Adrian Cole declared his engagement to Mara Ivanova, the former janitor of Cole Tower, the press exploded. Headlines screamed of scandal, fairy tale, betrayal, redemption. Some sneered that she was a gold digger, others romanticized her as Cinderella come to life. But Adrian silenced them all in one press conference. Standing beside Mara, his hand intertwined with hers, he looked directly into the cameras. "This woman is not a Cinderella. She is a queen who chose me, and I am the lucky one." From that moment, the whispers turned to awe. Their wedding was unlike anything the city had ever seen. A cathedral draped in white roses, chandeliers sparkling like stars, guests flown in from every corner of the globe. Royalty mingled with CEOs, celebrities with diplomats, all gathered to witness the union no one had dared predict. Mara walked down the aisle in a gown of flowing silk, her hair crowned with diamonds, her gray eyes luminous with quiet triumph. Adrian waited at the altar in a custom suit, but his gaze wasn't on the wealth around them. It was fixed only on her. When she reached him, he whispered, "You'll never be invisible again." The ceremony ended with thunderous applause, and as they stepped into the sunlight as husband and wife, the city roared with celebration. Newspapers the next morning declared it the wedding of the decade, a love story that defied every rule.
But for Adrian and Mara, the true luxury wasn't the diamonds or the headlines. It was the quiet promise they made to each other that night, away from the cameras, in the privacy of their new home. No more secrets, no more loneliness, only the future, planned and built together. Adrian kept his word. He funded Mara's education until she graduated with honors, cheering louder than anyone at the ceremony. He placed her at the head of his company's human resource division, not as a favor, but because she had earned it. And Mara kept her promise too. She loved him not for his wealth, but for the man beneath, the man who had finally let himself be seen. Together, they built something greater than skyscrapers. They built a life. And the whispers in the halls of Cole Tower faded into legend. The story of the janitor who became the queen, and the billionaire who finally found love.